Today there is substantial documentation to show that plants are as sensitive as any other creature.
Namaskaram, Sadhguru. My question is about milk. Milk is coming from the cows, which is a very torturous way.
How old are you?
I'm 32.
Oh, too late for milk drinking.
Sadhguru, I didn't understand.
Then you can drink milk. It's okay.
So, the cows are getting tortured just to get the milk from them, and it's about their reproductive system, and we are dependent on the milk which should be given to the her children, and this has been happening since ages, and also in the yogic system and in the temples. The milk is getting used for diyas and also for the linga, so I'm not sure how good it is. Sometimes I feel very bad about it.
I don't know where you saw diyas burning with milk. Anyway.
Made from the ghee,
all right.
made from the milk.
So, it's better to slaughter them, not torture them, right?
Well, it's better to leave them the way they want to
Oh,
live.
that will not happen. The only other option is slaughter them. So we think it's better to milk them rather than slaughter them.
Hey, what is up guys? So you may have seen one of my more recent videos titled Why Veganism Makes Smart People Stupid, where I go over why, in the face of veganism, a lot of scholars have their brains turn off. Well, this video is going to be kind of similar to that one, except we're going to be targeting spiritual gurus. And if you haven't seen my video on scholars, well, if you enjoy this video, you'll probably enjoy that one as well. So I'm going to leave it in the description. So in this video, we're going to talk about the spiritual meditation yogi kind of gurus who always talk about radiating positive energy, living a life of compassion, and reducing suffering, but still themselves support one of the largest catalysts for suffering in the world, the animal holocaust, and also do not preach for their followers to not support it. Now, before I go on with this video, I want to say that I acknowledge that the term spirituality is very broad and can mean a lot of things to everyone, and is probably one of the most broad terms in the English language. But it still is a fact that a lot of these spiritual gurus do push the message of, spread positivity, reduce suffering, radiate positive energy, etc. So why is veganism such a threat to these specific kinds of spiritual gurus? Well, in short, veganism is one of the ultimate tests for if somebody truly cares about reducing suffering substantially. It actually requires a decent amount of effort, at least in the beginning of implementation, but I'll get into that a little later in the video. So similar to what I said in my video about scholars, and how what they debate and discuss really only result in alterations of the mind, the kinds of practices these gurus promote, such as mindfulness meditation, etc., are very much mental efforts. They talk a lot about psychological suffering and teach ways in which we can learn to understand the nature of our own minds in an attempt to mitigate this psychological suffering and become better at observing our negative emotional states as opposed to identify with negative emotional states. Now, there is a specific value that we can extract from somebody such as Sadhguru or these other spiritual gurus who preach ways to mitigate psychological suffering and to radiate positivity out into the world. That very obvious value is that suffering, generally speaking, is bad. There are also spiritual gurus who are very strong in the field of yoga who practice a spiritual doctrine called ahimsa, which is shared by Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. It literally means non-injury and non-killing. It implies the total avoidance of harming of any kind of living creatures, not only by deeds, but also by words and in thoughts. I'm unsure if this is my vegan biased brain coming out, but when I hear that definition of the spiritual doctrine of ahimsa, I can't help but think about the fundamental principles of the vegan moral philosophy. So the question I have to ask is, how could somebody who consistently preaches about radiating positivity and reducing suffering plus claims to practice ahimsa, not be vegan? Veganism seeks to not support any industries which breed animals into horrific conditions where they are exploited and eventually murdered. Not only that, but industries which view animals as resources, commodities, and property. And when it comes to reducing suffering, we have to think about the fact that these animals are literally bred into existence. They didn't exist prior, but we bring them into existence and they suffer a great deal of their lives. So to support animal agriculture is to support an industry which literally generates beings into existence who live a life of majority suffering that couldn't have otherwise existed if they weren't bred into existence in the first place. These people's dollar increases demand, which increases supply, and supply in this case is animals. I think it is blatantly obvious that not supporting such industries are in alignment with the values of ahimsa, spreading positivity, and avoiding suffering. So again, how could anybody who preaches these kinds of things support a literal Holocaust, or even not preach that people should not support a Holocaust in their teachings, which are meant to radiate positivity and reduce suffering? Well, the answer to me is that it's convenient to not preach and follow these things, and I'll be explaining why in a couple moments, but first I want to go over my experience with living and examine life. I am somebody who has been practicing mindfulness meditation for the last year and a half and living a more examined life. I know what it means and what it entails to implement a lot of the teachings of these gurus. And to be honest, the effort required to live a more examined life does not in any way compare to the lifestyle shift you need to make upon going vegan. Living an examined life is not something that 90% of your peers are going to look at you weird for trying. It is not something that requires you to sacrifice many pleasures, and it's something that can be done in the privacy of your own home for 10 minutes a day. It's even something that you can do without telling anybody. And from the perspective of a spiritual guru, it's not too controversial and socially problematic of a thing to tell people to do. And compared to telling people to shift to veganism, or even shifting to veganism themselves, gurus advocating for people to live a more examined life is not nearly as contentious of a thing to advocate for, and actually committing to a more examined life does not compare either in terms of the magnitude of the lifestyle shift which comes with going vegan. When it comes to veganism and shifting your habits to be aligned with the moral philosophy, you will receive social pressure. Certain situations will lead you to have to tell people that you're vegan, which may lead to more social pressure, and practicing veganism is obviously more than 10 minutes a day in the privacy of your own home. Now, I know that meditation could last longer than 10 minutes a day, but I'm just saying that, generally speaking, meditation can be done 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, doesn't really matter, but veganism is more of an all-day thing that you have to think about. Imagine how much harder it would be for the average person to follow spiritual gurus if those gurus were consistent with their principle of let's reduce suffering and advocated for veganism and animal rights. Imagine if spiritual gurus were literally telling people you also need to change your daily food and clothing choices. They would surely have much less business and people listening. My point here is that what these gurus preach to do, radiate positivity and reduce suffering, usually have more to do with humans and the particular listener looking to live a more examined life, and nothing to do with non-human animals as well. And that if they did include reducing animal suffering in their teachings, their message would be much less digestible and they would have a much smaller reach. So for the gurus who gain some kind of financial benefit from spreading their teachings, it is probably within their best interest to keep their advice as easy to follow and non-controversial as possible. So when you see spiritual gurus get pressed on veganism, it's no surprise, especially in front of their audience, how they react. And some of them will even start to say that plants feel pain.
Are you vegetarian or non-vegetarian?
I'm a humanitarian.
Humanitarian?
Say, today there's substantial documentation to show that plants are as sensitive as any other creature. So whether you eat a plant or an animal or whatever, it is still violence. Only thing is they don't scream. They do scream, you don't hear, that's all. There's enough evidence to show that they do scream.
Alright guys, that is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird,